Tonight on Primetime Politics, an historic apology. The Pope says he's sorry for his church's role in the residential school system. We'll speak with a member of the Indigenous delegation in Rome about what it all means and the next steps in healing and reconciliation. Ukrainian members of parliament were in Ottawa meeting with Canadian ministers and MPs. One of them tells us what her country needs from Canada as it fights for its survival. And our journalist will be in to look at a week full of big developments in federal politics. But we start with a historic day in Rome. After a week of meetings with Canadian Indigenous survivors, Pope Francis issued an apology for what he called the deplorable acts of some church members in running Canada's residential school system. He also announced he will be coming to Canada to further meet with Canada's Indigenous peoples and to present his apology on Canadian soil. Here's part of what he had to say at the Vatican.
For the deplorable conduct of these members of the Catholic Church, I ask for God's forgiveness, and I want to say to you with all my heart, I am very sorry. And I join my brothers, the Canadian bishops, in asking your pardon. Clearly, the content of the faith cannot be transmitted in a way contrary to the faith itself.
That was Pope Francis speaking at the Vatican on Friday, apologizing for the role of the Catholic Church and some of its members in running Canada's residential school system. The residential schools were run from the late 1800s until as recently as 1996. An estimated 15,000 Indigenous children were separated from their families, and as you have been seeing in the news, hundreds of unidentified graves of children are being located to this day. Here is how some of the Indigenous delegates at the Vatican reacted to the papal apology on Friday.
And we accept this apology as a gesture of good faith that acknowledges he will come to our home and to visit with our families, to formally apologize to all our family members.
I was touched by the way in which he expressed his sorrow and also the way in which he condemned the actions of the Church in particular regards. There is much more to do, and so an apology is a part of a larger picture.
On Friday, Prime Minister Trudeau, in an official statement, acknowledged Pope Francis's apology and called it, quote, a step forward in acknowledging the truth of our past. Mitchell Case was a member of the delegation, which included Métis residential school survivors, and he's joining us now from Rome. Mitchell Case, first of all, thanks for joining us again.
Sure. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me.
It has been a few hours since you sat in that room, in that audience room, and you listened to the Pope speaking those words. What are your thoughts now? What are your feelings a few hours later?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a whirlwind of a day with the survivors here, and just my role here trying to as best as possible to support the survivors but it has been certainly a moving day to hear those words from the Pope today, to sit there and to throughout this week, throughout our encounter with the Pope on Monday to today, our experience on Monday and the experience that was shared with us by our Inuit and First Nations relatives, that it seemed that he genuinely was listening. He genuinely was trying to understand. And then to hear those words today was very, I think it'll do a lot of good for a lot of people. Okay,
I was going to ask you that. Did the apology, as you heard it, and a lot of people now are parsing every single word of it, did it express and did it address everything that you had hoped for and survivors might have hoped for in an apology?
Sure. So I'm a politician, so people parse my words all the time too, but I'm not going to do that today. I think what today is about is just being there to create space for survivors, and there will be survivors who found today's comments to be incredibly moving and everything they were looking for, and there will be survivors who think that it didn't go far enough and didn't say enough, and there will be survivors who don't care at all because no apology will ever make up for what happened to them, and they're all right. every one of those survivors is right, and I support them, and I send my support and my love and my prayers to them today, knowing that today, whatever you're feeling about it, it is significant. How it's significant to you is each of our own experience, and yeah. So I'm not going to get into parsing the words, and I'm certainly I would say if I were on the Pope's speech writing staff for when he comes to Canada, I might offer some suggestions, but I don't think I will be. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it there.
What about yourself, though? Yourself personally? I mean, I understand that is absolutely admirable. You're not trying to, presume how people should react. What about yourself, though?
To be honest, Martin, I'm still kind of processing it, and I think it was moving for me to sit there with the survivors, and some of them were very, very, very moved. And of course, the Pope was speaking in Italian, but we all had copies of his remarks in English. And I saw a few of the survivors when they turned to page 4 and saw those words, "I am sorry." There were more than one that I saw, begin to tear up. And I think I feel no matter what happens, progress has been made today, and I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Some people are describing this trip. You're mentioning some feelings of relief, some feelings of happiness. Other people, though, are describing the trip as a very difficult one for survivors. You're dealing with them. You're helping them. Some people have said it's been emotionally quite hard.
Oh, absolutely, and it's been emotionally quite hard. It's also been physically hard. I mean, we've got survivors with us that are in their mid 80s, and I'm jet lagged. I'm dealing with the walking the Roman streets. It's been physically challenging for a lot of the survivors, I think, just because of some of those challenges. But it's certainly emotionally. I think it's been challenging for survivors because they've also been. I think for some, it means they're reliving things. They're being asked to retell stories. And for our Métis survivors, quite frankly, this is the first time they're telling their stories because of the way that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established by the settlement agreement and the way the settlement agreement was established. Métis survivors and the Métis residential schools were left out. And so they actually haven't had a chance to tell their story. And so in many ways, this has been really really heavy for them.
Yeah, it's a watershed. When my colleague Peter Van Dusen spoke with you on Monday after your group had spoken to the Pope, your National Council president said an apology would be just a beginning. So what comes next?
I mean, I think, yes, President Karen said that on Monday, and she reiterated that again today, that the apology is the beginning, and it is the other things that we are certainly, we've provided a letter and a series of documents to the Holy Father, and those are available on the Métis National Council website. So I'd refer you there if you want to see very specific details of how we see the path forward. But, absolute, unfettered and free access to all records pertaining to the schools in our communities. Quite frankly, establishing a compensation framework for the Métis survivors who were excluded from the settlement agreement, and support for healing programs that have not yet been made available to Métis communities. Those are just there are other things, but it's been a long day. Those are the three that are top of my mind.
Are you optimistic that you will see movement on that? Because we have now a waiting period before the details of the Pope's visit to Canada and the apology on Canadian soil before that happens. Obviously, there's a lot of things people would like to see happen. Are you optimistic that we may see them, or might they just get swept aside in the apology is enough school of thought? I think I'm naturally a pessimistic guy, but our survivors are so determined and so forward thinking that I want to be hopeful. I also think that
I'm like I say, I'm a politician. I understand politics, and I understand the way that the public mood and the public opinion is shifting. I think that Canadians, outside of our nation or other Indigenous nations, I think Canadians are expecting tangible action. I think Canadians are expecting, okay, enough with words. Do the things that need to be done to bring a little bit of honor and integrity back to this country's dealings with Indigenous people. So I'm hopeful, and I'm getting a lot of messages from mainstream Catholics who are just happy to hear this, because they felt shame also understanding these histories, and that their spiritual leader has apologized.
Okay, well, on that note, that's a good note to leave it on. I want to thank you very much. Wish you good luck and a happy trip home. Thanks for speaking with us.
For sure. Thanks a lot, Martin. Take care.
As Russia's war on Ukraine continues into its 37th devastating day, 5 members of the Ukrainian parliament were visiting Ottawa, meeting with MPs and ministers to press the Canadian government for more help as their country struggles to survive the Russian attacks. Maria Ionova has been a member of the Ukrainian parliament since 2012, and she joins me now from the foyer of the House of Commons. Madam Ionova, first of all, thank you very much for speaking with us, and welcome to Canada.
Thank you so much. It's my first visit to Canada, but unfortunately on a very sad event.
Yeah, that's well. The important thing is your message and your discussions with the Prime Minister, the ministers, and the MPs. Let's get straight to it. What more do you need from Canada?
Thank you for your question. First of all, the war has been started, and Russian aggression has been started in 2014. But of course, 37 days, the full escalation and invasion has been started. And we really appreciate all the high-ranking meetings what we had with the Prime Minister, with the ministers, with the parliamentarians, with the senators. And of course, we are very thankful and grateful for all the support which Canada has already done, but we need more. That's our main message. And if we are talking about sanctions, we need more. If we are talking about humanitarian aid, we are sure that first humanitarian aid is a weapon, because we have to save our civilian people, especially who are in blocked towns and cities. And also regarding humanitarian organizations, we also need Canadian leadership to be in a full capacity of humanitarian organizations on the ground, because unfortunately after 37 days it's not enough, and we are not able, together with international organizations, to provide these humanitarian corridors. I can tell you my story that I visited Zaporizhia last week, and I saw all these people, and children especially, who were wounded during humanitarian corridors. So after all this disaster, when they were in the shelters and basements, they were starving. They had no water, no electricity, no heatings and utilities, and they have been attacked during these humanitarian corridors.
You mentioned humanitarian aid, and you said that military aid is a first step. Your colleagues, during your press conference this morning, all 5 of you stressed the need for more military aid. Now, we've been told in Canada that what we've been sending you is more or less run out. We've run out of the weapons that we've been sending you, like anti-tank missiles, grenade and rocket launchers, and other munitions. But your colleagues and you were asking for other weapons, heavier weapons, like tanks and armored vehicles and howitzers. Is that true?
First of all, first, what we need to protect is air. We understand that we cannot get now no-fly zone, but we can have our Ukrainian no-fly zone, and we have a special weapon and equipment to protect our air, and not only for humanitarian corridors, but also for our critical infrastructure. Right. You know that more than 700 infrastructural objects have been damaged and ruined, and that's also a question how to defend our nuclear power plants. It's also a question. And when we are talking about heavy weapon, yes, we are talking about offensive and defensive weapon, as we think that it's the only one way how can we defend, not to attack, to defend our people, our nation, and to kick out Russian troops and their weapon from our territory.
What kind of an answer have you gotten from government officials here in Canada with regards to heavier weapons, such as armored personnel, carriers, howitzers, mortar rounds, things like that?
We are sure that we have been heard, and we were told that Canada will stand with Ukraine. So we're just looking for results and action, so to do more.
Okay. At your press conference, you also mentioned financial aid, and one of your fellow MPs mentioned a special financial instrument that you've been told that Canada was working on. Can you tell us any more about that and what Canadian officials have told you about that?
When we are talking now about short period strategy, of course now we need help to our state budget. And second, it's long period strategy, it's long-term strategy, it's probably more about also like Lend-Lease Act and also like to open second West front like it was during Second World War, because economy is suffering. I mean, really, you see how the whole nation is united, you see how the whole institutions are united, but of course we need resources for this, and Putin knows that we are like running out also of financial resources. Okay. That is why we are asking for more sanctions. From 333 banks, not only 6 banks to switch off from SWIFT, but also another. And of course, we see the leadership here of Canadians, because you were first who provide embargo on oil and gas. So we would like you to be like an example for other Western countries. And also I would like to say that on behalf of Ukrainian nation, I can tell you that we are not only MPs, of course, we are volunteers and we are mothers, and now all children, all Ukrainian children are our children, and that is why we would like to protect them all. I know that Canada has 1,400,000 Ukrainians, and during all the centuries we know why Ukrainians had to leave Ukraine and to go to Canada and other countries, because Russian attacking us during centuries. And that is why today is a historical moment to defeat Putin, and to defeat him at all, and he has to be punished in international tribunal, and to carry responsibility for all that war crimes what he has provided on our land, because we just want to be sovereign, independent, part of European family and part of NATO.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank you very much, and I want to wish you all the best. Stay safe, and you have all of our best wishes.
Thank you so much.
Well, joining me now to look at a pretty momentous week in federal politics are 2 veteran members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Tonda MacCharles is a national political reporter for the Toronto Star, and Bob Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Both of you, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Martin. Thanks for having us.
Okay, let's start with something. I mean, I mentioned veteran reporters because this is an issue that we've been covering for so long and we've been watching for so many years. What do you make of what you saw today at the Vatican and Pope Francis? Tonda.
Look, I think you don't have to be an Indigenous person or a Catholic, for that matter, to get the significance of the moment today. And hopefully the Pope will come to Canada and give many of the Indigenous communities what they need to hear here on the soil in North America. But I think that the import of this can't be underestimated. It was a call for action by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I really wondered what Prime Minister Trudeau thought of it all, how he heard about it today, because honestly, he is a Catholic and he has been calling for this and urging Catholics to pressure the church for just this moment today. So I think all around it was pretty historic. And again, it's just one step along that journey. So, but nevertheless, a pretty big day.
I just want to throw something in because you mentioned the Prime Minister. I read his press release, and his press release said, I acknowledge the Pope's apology. It wasn't I thank him for it. It was a very parsed, very interesting reaction. Bob, what do you make of what we saw today?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't be thanking him for making an apology. The church has dragged its feet for decades in acknowledging the terrible things of sexual abuse that it committed against children. And and it will be an important moment for sure when the Pope comes to Canada and goes up into these Indigenous communities and hears them and then apologizes them in person. I think that'll be, to me, much more significant. But let's remember, there are pedophile priests, including a man in France in a church sanctuary, who has been accused of abusing children. And these people are now adults. They've lived with the horrors of being abused by this priest. If the Catholic Church was true to its word about apology, it would have that priest sent back to Canada to face charges of the kind of abuse that he did to these Indigenous and Inuit children. So, fine with apologies, but boy, oh boy, they've got a lot to atone for.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention...
And further to Bob's point, look, there are still questions around the return of documents, turning documents over to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation, and giving communities the ability to track down perpetrators and to identify lost children in unmarked graves, and also to chase down justice today. Bob is absolutely right. The church is a long ways from having met its obligations to people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just going to interject that what we saw this week, too, ironically, was that the RCMP issued a Canada-wide arrest warrant for this priest in question to face charges, of allegedly abusing children in Nunavut. Obviously, he's still in France, so the request from the Inuit, especially this week, was for the Pope to actually get involved directly. Okay, I want to look at the week in general, because this was something that was a big development. This was a week full of big developments. I know, Tonda, you wrote about one of those developments, and many people said that we would never see a national affordable daycare program, and we saw the last bits of that program come into effect this week with the announcement by Ontario. We now have a national program. We also saw midweek the follow-up with the government's first ever legislation spelling out its commitments to greenhouse gas emission reductions. What do you make of the week, Tonda?
Well, just on the first piece, I'm one of those people who never thought I'd ever see a national child care plan. I mean, I've been covering it for decades, and since the Harper government sort of efforts to try and build one, and then the Paul Martin government's efforts, and then the Harper government killed it and tried to put in some other kind of system. Look, I really think that we can't, though, say it's in place yet. A lot depends on the implementation. But absolutely, it's a huge hole to fill to have gotten Ontario on board with this framework. But the combination of that and the climate change plan, rolling out an actual plan insofar as it is a plan to meet the targets by 2030, there are still big gaps in there.
Yeah.
I think what it said to me was that this is a government that, notwithstanding the war in Ukraine, notwithstanding huge global issues, notwithstanding COVID and the pandemic that's ongoing, is trying to get back to its governing agenda. To what extent we'll see more of that in the budget coming up this week. I mean, I think the government deems itself to have been elected on a certain mandate that it wants to follow through on. And ever since it was elected first in 2015, it gets sidetracked by events, whether it was NAFTA, whether it was Donald Trump, whether it was the pandemic, and now the global recession. Look, I think that's the effort that they're focused on now, trying to get back to doing some of the things in their platform.
And you mentioned it. Well, Bob, what do you make of the week? Because I want to get to the budget and what you're watching for. What do you make of the week, the kind of week it was?
Well, look, these were all set pieces for next week's budget. There's a lot of spending here going on, an awful lot of spending. We know it's billions of dollars for the child care, $9 billion at least for the climate change initiatives, and there's billions and billions of more in election spending that will be announced in the budget, as well as they've got to show the money that they're going to be spending on dental care and farmer care as part of the NDP deal. And what we're going to be, at least what I'm going to be watching for, is whether they're, with all of this spending, which, by the way, the government is lucky because inflation, commodity prices have been high and corporate balance sheets are strong, that they have money to be able to spend. But the business community is really, really concerned that there's not going to be any growth strategy, that their growth strategy just spend more money on an already overheated economy. And the danger here is inflation. And we're adding more fuel to inflation, and this is going to be, it's going to end up with the Bank of Canada having to significantly increase interest rates to drive down inflation. And so to me, we have to watch next week is there a growth agenda to create wealth in this country and help productivity and competitiveness? And also to be able to watch how much they spend so it doesn't fuel inflation. If they don't do any of that, we could be into a lot of trouble in the next few years.
Okay, Tonda, you alluded it. You opened the door to the federal budget. Next Thursday, Chrystia Freeland tables the budget. We know that it's not going to be that cliffhanger about will they be defeated on this budget, a confidence vote, because the NDP, they've got to deal with the NDP who are going to support the next 4 budgets. What are you looking for particularly in the budget? Given that you won't have that element of drama, but what are you watching for?
Well, notwithstanding the lack of drama as to whether the government lives or dies on the budget vote, I think that, first of all, Bob's pointed out a couple of big pieces. Who's going to pay for it all? How is it all going to be paid for? How is Canada going to reduce its deficit? What is the track to reduce the deficit and the debt to GDP ratio, which is what the government initially set out as its first sort of measure of success. But I'm also looking for, given the moment we're in and given the very heated rhetoric we've heard around the Ukraine war, the aggression of Russia in Ukraine, and what that means for democracies everywhere, according to the government, I'm going to be also very much keen to see how the government addresses that moment, what kind of defense spending they're prepared to put on the table to match their rhetoric with action.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a very interesting one because we've had some mixed signals. We had about 2 weeks ago, Defense Minister Anita Anand saying that she was going to submit different scenarios to the Finance Minister, Minister Freeland, one of which would be for a massive increase in spending, and then she seems to have not mentioned that again. Bob, your sense of what are you watching for in terms of defense spending?
Well,
if you had to,
I agree with Tonda that we're going to have I think we'll see in the budget obviously is issues around the green economy. Affordability issues. They've already said that a core component of the budget will be measures to help people build more houses and more low-cost housing. But to Tonda's point, we're going to all watch with clear eyes to see whether there's this budget on defense is more smoke and mirrors, or whether they're really serious about significantly increasing defense spending, including $4 billion to beef up NORAD, or whether all this money is projected later down the road and can be easily not fulfilled, like they've done so often with defense budgets. So it'll be an important moment to see whether Canada actually stands up with other NATO allies and puts money where its mouth is. Money.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank you, and we will watch with great interest, and we will no doubt speak post-budget. Thanks, both of you.
Thanks, Martin.
And that's all for another edition of Primetime Politics on CPAC. I'm Martin Stringer. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.